Welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Joanne Brazington in Marketing and Communications for Wofford College, and I'll be monitoring the Q&A and chat during the event. We have several pre-submitted questions, but we will take additional questions at the end if we have time. If we do not have time, I will make sure you receive a response within the next 24 hours. This event will last no more than an hour. If you cannot stay for the entire webinar, we ask that you be patient. We're going to post a link in the next day or two, and we'll put a note in the Conquer and Prevail e-newsletter. Special thanks for the support of this event goes to Martin Agner and Kay Foster in Information Technology Services and the team in Marketing and Communications. Sharing the preliminary report from the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategic Vision Steering Committee are our co-chairs, Dr. Christine Dinkins, William R. Keenan, Professor of Philosophy, and Dr. Ramon Galañanes, Director of Undergraduate Research and Postgraduate Fellowships. Also with us is Student JEDI Representative Journey Jones, 2021 graduate, so she's no longer a student, who will be attending law school in the fall. Thank you all for sharing the report with the Wofford community. Let's begin.
Thank you so much, Joanne. I think we will. We have a PowerPoint here that we're going to be sharing. Let me just get that started real fast. Slideshow from start. All right, here we go. So just a few things to keep in mind in terms of the steering committee charge. As a reminder, we were charged with recommending a strategic plan and vision for an equitable and just Wofford. And in order to do that, we collected data. We had listening sessions, and this strategic vision and plan we have presented to the Board of Trustees just a few weeks ago. The steering committee itself consists of 15 members. They're listed here on the PowerPoint. They are students, faculty members, staff members, members of the Board of Trustees. I think the fact that we were able to work closely together with such a range of views and different experiences across decades, that in itself was very powerful. One member here of the committee is Journey Jones, who, Journey, if you could just share a little bit about kind of your thoughts and experience about the process of being a member of the JEDI committee.
Sure, thank you, Ramon. I will say that in the beginning as a student, I was a little bit skeptical of, we hear it a lot, trust the process, and I wasn't sure what that would look like or what it might yield. But working on the committee with such committed members who really wanted to make this as impactful as we truly could in the most genuine of ways has really led to some good work, I think, and a positive spin for me personally on the trust the process notion. So this has been a really great learning opportunity for me as far as strategic visioning and management and things of that nature, but also as a former student now to see the positive direction that Wofford is going.
Okay, all right, thank you, Journey. We had 5 working groups: history, memory, and place, curriculum, teaching and advising, student life, enrollment, recruitment and marketing, policies, procedures, and JEDI structure. And those, you could see the folks listed who were part of those working groups. We also had folks who were not necessarily on the full committee, but helped us with, as members of the working groups, and we are incredibly grateful for their support. Some of those folks include Dr. Dwayne Pruitt, Dr. Philip Stone, Dr. Tracy Rebels, Dr. Trina Jones as well, who helped with these working groups.
And we wanted to tell you a little bit about the work by our student researchers. We put out an open call to current students of who wanted to join the JEDI research team. And these wonderful 11 students joined our team through that application process. And they were very quick learners. They were incredibly dedicated to this work. We trained them on qualitative data analysis, on how to co-facilitate the listening sessions and take really thorough notes in those sessions. So they have been an integral part of this process, and we are grateful to them. And also very, very important shout out to our 3 consultants, all of whom we're very proud to say are Wofford alumni. I'm not sure I have their years in my head quite, but Dr. Deborah Johnson-Ross, who helped design our entire visioning process, including the listening sessions and the surveys and the way that we did the visioning process within the committee. We owe her a great debt. And also Caitlin Meyer, a very recent Wofford graduate, helped oversee the entire student research team and helped organize all of our data. And Kathleen Hughes, our most recent alumna to be on the team, served as our qualitative data analyst to analyze especially the faculty and staff and community data. So we appreciate the work from all of those who helped us.
All right, and just a little bit of an update on the completed work. We had about 100 hours of listening sessions, alumni, students, faculty, staff, friends of the college. We had over 350 people complete surveys. The working groups, they also conducted research and also had, met with different, experts when it came to kind of the areas that we were focused on. We had over 500 people participate, and we are incredibly grateful for everyone who shared a little bit their thoughts and experiences. Yes, we're incredibly grateful for everyone who has helped us and sharing about sharing their ideas and thinking about Wofford, both its past and ways to and its future as well.
And we wanted to start by giving you an update on the recommendations that we shared in the town hall and on the JEDI website back in February. This is from the report that went to the Board of Trustees in February that was called our preliminary report. It had 5 recommendations. So our updates on those, we're very, very, very excited that what is now being called, I think, the Chief Equity Officer. The job ad already went out. That hiring is in process. Through a careful process with a search advocate. And we hope to have a cabinet level new colleague in place in that role by September 1st. That goes along with recommendation 2, increasing budget and staffing for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and other areas with DEI focuses. That is under consideration now by President Samhat and by the board. They also want to make sure that decisions they make in terms of that are done with the input of the new Chief Equity Officer. And so that is part of that process. And then recommendation 3, the provost has already continued this program for next year, and Wofford remains committed to this program as long as we're getting positive feedback from those who participate in it. And I'll hand off to Ramon for recommendations 4 and 5.
Sure. Thank you, Christine. We have also joined University Studying Slavery Consortium. That is led by our provost, Sosolsky. I think that's a great opportunity. A number of colleges in South Carolina are part of that, as well as colleges throughout the country. In terms of recommendation 5, establish a fund to create historical markers. And also a new Wofford history book to think of ways to continue telling our story. That fund has in fact been established, and there have been several alumni who have already contributed to that. We are very grateful. If you are interested in learning more about that, feel free to contact Calhoun Kennedy or David Wood in the Office of Advancement. So those recommendations In fact, all of these have been implemented, and they're in progress as of now.
And we wanted to give you an overview of our process. I should say up front, this is a very simplified version of it, but this captures the basics of it. We had, as Ramon already explained, over 500 participants in our listening sessions and surveys, resulted in 500 pages of data. That was a major component in what informed the work of our committee. That data was coming in over a period of about 4 months during our work. So simultaneous to that, we had working groups doing their own research, which we will share more with you in a minute about how that worked. The 5 working groups that my colleague already explained. And we had it's more cyclical than it looks like on this slide, but basically working groups worked on recommendations, presented them to the JEDI committee. The JEDI committee gave feedback. The working groups took that feedback, also checked with other key personnel and experts, and repeated that process until the recommendations were ready in their final form for the JEDI committee to have final discussions on, and then to vote on. So the committee voted on the recommendations. All our meetings are on Zoom if you want to picture this. So we were voting using the Zoom polling functions. And only then, once all the recommendations passed, did they end up in our official report to the board. So what we delivered to the board in May was the strategic vision, which includes the strategic vision language, some framing language, and then 30 recommendations, all of which passed through the full committee. And the board will be having a special meeting in August to discuss the strategic vision and the recommendations. And one thing that I think our whole committee wants to emphasize with this process is, you'll notice that Dr. Samhat, our president, is not listed here. That's because he was very supportive of the process, but he always stayed at arm's length. If we needed information or help from him, he was very available, but he was very careful to stay out of this process. We very much were a committee formed by him and empowered by him, and then he let us do our work independently, as happens at good, respectable academic institutions. And so we really want to emphasize that's how this process happened at Wofford. And then next, a little bit more about how our working group research worked. Each working group was a little bit different because of the different kinds of topics they were looking at, but generally all of us did benchmarking with peer institutions. We were also always aware that benchmarking is not enough data by itself, especially since a lot of the institutions we compare ourselves to are also just starting out on this layer of this sort of new movement of justice and equity work. And so we don't want to just be catching up to them. We want to be leading as well. But the benchmarking data helped us with that. And we met with relevant experts both on our own campus and on other campuses relative to whatever topic we were working on. And we did targeted listening sessions with relevant groups. So for instance, the working group on enrollment, I know met with college counselors from various areas to try to ask them very specific questions, get wisdom and guidance from them. And then we also studied a lot of Wofford institutional data, data provided by our Office of Institutional Research or other internal offices. For instance, we had data on the rates of Ds and Fs and withdrawals and incompletes in courses disaggregated by Pell eligible status, by race, other measures. We had lots of data like that to help inform our recommendations and our overall process as well.
All right, just a little bit about, in terms of invitations to join the conversation, we emailed every current student, staff member, and faculty member. The Office of Advancement emailed more than 13,000 alumni to participate. We also did send some targeted invitations to several community leaders and friends of the college. There was a great article in Wofford Today in winter 2020 with a Q&A with JEDI and also an invitation to participate in the process. Conquer and Prevail sent a number of invitations, updates. that are listed here, 44, 48, 49, 51, and so on. So we did want to include as many people, as part of this process, and sorry. So that's just a little bit in terms of overview of the invitations to participate. Everyone was asked for main questions, and they are: what does Wofford mean to you? What were the issues that concerned you and fellow students during your studies at Wofford? How do you think Wofford should acknowledge the issue of slavery in its history? And what issues should take priority as Wofford contemplates its future? So these were the four essential questions that were asked. And then, of course, if you participated in a listening session, there were also some, follow-up questions to these to kind of dig a little bit deeper into these issues.
Yes, and following up on that, I want to emphasize just how general those four questions were that Ramon just shared with you. That was very deliberate on our part because we didn't want to lead anybody. We wanted everybody who participated, our alumni, our students, faculty, staff, we wanted them to be able to tell us what they wanted us to hear, to tell us what was important to them. So the four questions were framed quite broadly so that people could take it in whatever direction they thought was most important. And so what resulted from that was more than we're sharing here, a lot of themes. And the themes, if you know a little bit about qualitative research, the themes naturally emerge from the data. These were not predetermined. As the data was coming in, our student research team and those of us overseeing that process watched the data, studied it, looked for recurrent themes. And once something recurs enough, it became an official theme. So these are some of our samples here. Overwhelmingly, and I think I mentioned this at the February town hall, Wofford as a community. When we ask people, what does Wofford mean to you? Almost always we heard answers about relationships, friendships. Community is at the very heart of what we do, not just for our students and alumni, but our faculty and staff as well. Those who work at Wofford emphasize the importance of community and how central that is to the Wofford ethos. Wofford tradition came up, not surprisingly, a fair amount, spoken of in positive and negative ways, in neutral ways. It came up in a lot of different complex ways. Strong academics and a place for growth almost always came up in a positive sense. Alumni feeling like they got a good education to prepare them for the world and for their work. Students feeling like they're getting good education. Different experiences of students and alumni varying by decade and identity. So we heard a lot about people's experiences while they were at Wofford, and there were interesting differences depending on what decade the students had come. I mean, some of that, of course, is pretty obvious. Some were here during the Vietnam War, for instance, that very much colored their experience during college, but also different experiences, say, between our Black alumni and our white alumni in terms of how welcome they felt on campus, how easily they found friends or faculty to talk to. Culture shift came up in a lot of different ways. Alumni who were worried about a culture shift, students and some faculty and staff who were saying we need a culture shift, but in very specific and careful ways. Sustainability and recruitment, recognizing that moving toward more justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion will help us recruit students, will help Wofford stay strong going into the future. Perceptions of communications concerns. This came up in terms of not just JEDI related matters, but other matters as well. People wanting more consistent and clear communication from Wofford leadership. Then also we had separate themes for administrative, faculty, staff, and community themes, because, for instance, themes having to do with employment, of course, the alumni and students weren't talking about, but some of that came up as well, and all of that is in our report. So the report that we delivered to the board starts with this, our strategic vision language. Wofford College will be a leader among liberal arts colleges in promoting principles of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and will integrate these principles into every aspect of its operations. Wofford will prepare students to be active citizens who contribute, serve, and thrive in a diverse world. And all of that vision statement and our recommendations and the entire report are also grounded in Wofford's mission statement and core values, which are available on the Wofford website and are also linked from our report. So this is the strategic vision for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. At a glance, you will see that we have divided this into the 3 highest level goals. These are goals that consistently came up in working group research. They came up in our listening sessions and surveys, in the committee's other kinds of work. And these seem to be the highest level goals needed to make our campus and our college and our community a place that is inclusive and welcoming to all, so that they can all feel a sense of belonging. Which hopefully we can all agree all of our students and alumni and employees deserve. So the goal 1 of the 3 high-level goals is the inclusive physical campus, landscape that welcomes all, a landscape that has inclusive spaces to meet the needs of diverse groups, and also, because of the nature of our campus, needs to include a full examination of Wofford's history. Goal 2, inclusive academic excellence, finding ways to make sure our faculty and others who teach our students, the curriculum itself, pathways to internships and other important pre-career options, connections between our curriculum and the Spartanburg community, that all of those are happening in as inclusive a way as possible. And then goal 3, an inclusive student experience, which touches on student life, policies that affect student life, the Greek organizations, the need for Greek organizations that can represent all of our students who want to participate in that opportunity, and diversity of staff at all levels of the college. And steps needed to support those 3 goals include inclusive and equitable policies and practices throughout our college operations, and of course, continuing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work. And we're going to now tell you just a few of the recommendations that are in the full report, and they are color-coded by each goal. So I'll hand back off to Ramon to talk about the physical campus.
Sure. Yeah. So in order to have an inclusive physical campus, the first recommendation is to adopt a new naming system for current and future residence halls, purposely chosen to emphasize Wofford's common history and community. Goal number 2, allocate and raise funds for the construction of a new house or houses within the Greek Village, NPHC, fraternities and sororities, and for support of the activities and functions of these organizations. Recommendation 5, create a position of campus historian or historian of the college. These are just a few of those recommendations that fall under the goal of an inclusive physical campus.
And then under inclusive academic excellence, the first one listed in that category is increase BIPOC and other forms of diversity in faculty, staff, and administration. We wanted that deliberately to be as the highest level goal in that category. Students need to see themselves in those who teach them, and they need to benefit from expertise and life experience of people from diverse backgrounds. And recommendation 14, and some of the other recommendations you'll see today they're going to cost some money, and we're hoping our alumni and other donors will help with that. But one thing we talked about in our framing language is that an operating budget is a moral document, among other things. And so if we want to make sure our students have inclusive and equitable experiences, we need to make sure that we have the budget that allows them to do that. And so recommendation 14 is one of those examples. For study abroad interim, which is a very, very, very central thing at Wofford, we are recommending that we have structures in place to ensure best practices for intercultural engagement for study away interim courses, which may be study abroad or maybe other kinds of study away domestically. And once those structures are in place, create equitable access to one study away, including study abroad interim for all students, regardless of financial need. And then we also had 24 participants from the Spartanburg community and our listening sessions. It was extremely generous of them to share their time with us. We learned a lot from speaking with them. And we also spoke with faculty and staff who are already doing community engagement in their work already on campus. And things we learned from those conversations are the need to have to increase the amount and the consistency of community engagement in the curriculum. Our students want that. They want that opportunity to be engaged in the Spartanburg community. And what we hear from community members is that they want the K through 12 students in Spartanburg to have more interaction with Wofford students and have more chances to be on our beautiful campus and to be able to see themselves as future college students, which is an incredibly important way that Wofford can, as one community member put it, give a hand up to the community, not a hand out. And then along with that, providing support to ensure public research and community engaged research are practiced in ways that promote equity and uplift the Spartanburg community, which would include, for instance, paying Spartanburg experts for their expertise when they help us with projects, and also making sure that community experts are involved early on in research process to help shape the research that happens.
All right, and under the inclusive student experience, here are two of those goals. Develop a strategic, or actually recommendations to achieve those goals. Develop a strategic plan for diversity recruitment and enrollment for 2022 to 2026. Recommendation number 25: increase support for Wofford's counseling services. This past year and actually these last several years, there has been a huge growth in the need for counseling services, not just here at Wofford, but throughout many colleges throughout the country. These are recommendations to ensure that our students feel like they're included, like this is their community. And of course, there's a few other recommendations. A few things that we want you to keep in mind for the strategic vision report. You'll be able to find that on our website, and also we will be continuing to post updates. This August, there will be a special Board of Trustees meeting in which they will discuss our strategic vision report and recommendations, and that is taking place in August. At this point, we will, Christy, go ahead. I don't know if
sorry, I was just going to add, especially seeing the questions in the chat, one more thing, and I think you already said this, Ramon, but I wanted to emphasize that yes, the report that will be on the JEDI website is exactly the same report that was delivered to the trustees. You can see what they are, you can see what's in their hands that they're discussing, that they'll be working on at their August meeting. And in terms of as these recommendations begin to be implemented, and many are already in progress, even the ones that we just delivered in May, we will be tracking that in various ways on the JEDI website. And Joanne and her team have been wonderful about helping us get out updates. So we are committed to making sure the entire Wofford community gets updated as those recommendations get discussed and hopefully implemented, and the progress that happens with those.
Right. At this point, we're going to take questions. Oh, we can't hear you, Joanne.
We do have a number of pre-submitted questions, and I am going to continue to check the Q&A feature and the chat. And if we have time, we'll get to even more. All right, the first question is, what problems at Wofford were identified in the surveys and previous town hall meetings that resulted in the recommendations made by the JEDI committee? Christine, would you like to take that one?
Sure, thank you, Joanne. And I'm guessing that also refers to our listening sessions that we held. So what problems at Wofford were identified in the surveys and listening sessions that resulted in our recommendations? Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I want to emphasize that while certainly we did identify some challenges and some needs to fill some gaps and that sort of thing, our approach was not necessarily to directly look for problems and then try to solve them. Our approach was much more starting from listening to our community, doing our research in various ways, as we talked about, seeing what we learned from all of that, and then looking to what our current students need, what Wofford needs to be sustainable. That was more of our approach rather than necessarily problem solving. And so our strategic vision and the 30 recommendations that are part of it are meant to not so much solve problems as it is to help Wofford move forward in a way that is sustainable, that will keep it strong, and that will also help it be a leader among liberal arts colleges in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Ramon, this one's going to be for you. Define the role that critical race theory will play in college classrooms if the JEDI report were to be adopted.
Okay, well, thank you, Joanne. Well, I know, you know, in recent months, critical race theory has been a topic of discussion in the news. You know, in the field of political science, it's not necessarily a new theory. And just to kind of give you an example, so last semester, this past spring semester, I taught Foundations of World Politics. And in that course, one of the persons that we read was Roxanne Doty, right? And Roxanne Doty is a constructivist, but within that, she does take kind of this critical race theory perspective in which she looks at how, you know, issues of race and nationality shaped U.S. foreign policy, right? Specifically U.S. foreign policy in the Philippines. That's an example of critical race theory, at least in the area of political science. It was one of the readings among other readings that we did in that class. We also read John Mearsheimer's piece on great power politics. We read pieces by Samuel Huntington. So, you know, critical race theory is not new in some academic departments. And it is not something that we are going to mandate for other professors that they need to teach. Professors should teach what they want to teach and how they want to teach. You know, we believe in folks being able to, you know, approach their discipline as they would like to, you know. So that's kind of, those are some of my thoughts when it comes to critical race theory.
All right, thank you, Ramon. Ramon, how about this one too? What recommendations has the JEDI committee made regarding removal of the past presidents' names from campus buildings? And what was their rationale for their decision?
Okay, all right, thank you, Joanne. So, you know, working group one, History, Memory in Place, we spent a lot of time thinking about the physical landscape of Wofford and Wofford's history as well. You know, the first residence hall that you know, was named for a president, it was named after President Carlisle, and this was several of his students raised money to create a dorm. This was 1912. So the process of, oh, sorry, the process, sorry about that. The process of having residence hall named for past presidents, you know, evolved kind of gradually and perhaps even unintentionally. And, you know, that was part of Wofford's tradition. But within that tradition, one, it does not recognize even all of our presidents, right? There are, you know, Gaines, Bernie Dunlap, you know, Hardin, there's no dorms named after them, right? So our rationale for recommendation one to create this new residence hall naming system for just honorific dorms was to, one, to tell our full history, right? And two, to create a campus community that is inclusive, right? I think there are other people that are worthy of recognition on Wofford's campus, be it alumni, be it members of the Board of Trustees, be it current students. And so the thinking is that we needed to come up with a new way to tell our story and to tell it in such a way that is inclusive and in which people come to this campus and they feel that they are part of it, right? So that's a little bit of the rationale, and you could read the full rationale in the report that will be posted on the website.
Okay, next. If the JEDI strategic plan is adopted, how do you see Wofford changing in the next 20 years? That's a fun question. Christine, would you take that one?
Sure, I was thinking too, that's a fun question. So if the strategic plan is adopted, how do we see Wofford changing in the next 20 years? Yeah, I think, honestly, I'd rather start with what's not going to change, I think, and then I promise to also answer the question. I think what most or maybe all of us think is at the heart of Wofford is not going to change. Our strong liberal arts core, our belief that relationships underpin everything we do. I think all of that is going to stay and maybe get better, but other than that, remain unchanged. In terms of that being a set of our values, it certainly won't change. I think what will change will be, I think of it in terms of our highest level goals, a campus that will be more inclusive, so that students who are prospective students who may be unsure whether they want to come to Wofford, because maybe they're a member of the LGBT community, maybe they're Black or Latino, making sure our campus, because the signs are easy to read, and there are spaces that are inclusive of all. I think that will change in a really positive way. I think we will hopefully get a more diverse faculty and staff. That's incredibly important. That changes everything in terms of the college operations, including the way we teach our classes. And I think our students will be getting an even stronger liberal arts education because we are approaching it thoughtfully and we continue to revisit those questions. And student experience. I think what we want to see in our strategic vision is more consistent experience, more consistent options for all of our students. Greek life, for those of you who went to Wofford maybe 40, 50 years ago, Greek life continues to be a big part of the Wofford student experience. And if it's going to be that big part, then it has to be inclusive of all students. And right now what we're hearing is that in many ways it is not. So my hope is if we adopt these recommendations and the strategic plan, that and other aspects of student life will just help to create that sense of inclusivity and belonging for all of our students, so that we don't have students leaving because they feel out of place or they feel unwelcome. It breaks our heart when we see that happen. And I think with this in place, that will happen less, hopefully, yeah. And I also want to hand off to Journey, because I think she may have thoughts on this question as well.
Thank you, Dr. Dinkins. I feel like in 20 years, I hope that through these initiatives, Wofford is not only graduating students who are leaders, but that the school itself can become a leader among higher ed institutions, specifically in these areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I know that that is only going to be possible if this is kind of the starting point, and that over those next years, these initiatives can continue, and that Wofford can be a place where students, faculty, and staff can feel safe and empowered to really contribute to the forward movement of this institution. I think that is going to be imperative, that the work continues beyond this point.
Journey, I have another question for you. For the students on the committee, what did you learn in this process, or what surprised you?
Thank you. I'd say I did learn a lot, but I think there were so many of us, not just the younger ones of us, not just the students, but the faculty and the staff and the trustees who also learned, just through everyone sharing their experiences and really understanding that there are some adverse experiences that students have at Wofford that are avoidable and that can be changed moving forward. But if you think in terms of sports, I think my biggest takeaway is that no one, all these records that are being broken, no one ever broke them until they did. No one ever thought they were possible until it happened, and then that record gets broken time and time again because suddenly it's possible. So I like to think that JEDI kind of started out these tough conversations that people just weren't having, that can be the starting point, but that it's just so much easier moving forward past this point, because people have these tough conversations, to share their experiences, to learn from one another, and to move forward in progressive ways. But I hope this is kind of the starting point. This is kind of the record breaker, and then everything else is that much easier to and attainable to make happen.
Thanks, Journey. All right, Ramon, how will justice and equity work continue now that the committee's work is finished?
I think that, well, that's a great question. I think, well, I mean, I think that work is everyone's responsibility. You know, and even, you know, in my case, even before, you know, being a member of JEDI, I've been involved in this work in different capacities. I also think that, I mean, there is, you know, we're in the process of hiring a new chief equity officer, which I think is great, you know, and then there'll be a person to help coordinate these efforts. So I think, you know, I think this work will continue in many different ways. I think that the students and alumni have an important role to play in this work as well. And, you know, I think Wofford has a proud tradition of being involved in, you know, some of these issues. You know, there were, you know, alumni from the 1970s that took, you know, African Americans to vote, you know, during civil rights struggle, right? So we, you know, that is part of our tradition, and I think it will continue in many different ways. You know, once even though JEDI might not exist anymore as a committee.
All right. Let's see. Okay, first of all, we have a comment. It says, first of all, I'm impressed with how much progress you and your committee have made in such a short time. My question is one of implementation. What do you think will be the biggest hurdle when trying to implement the JEDI committee's recommendation? Funding, staffing, getting the right people, institutional inertia, cultural norms? That is a big question, but I think Christine Dinkins is up for it.
I am, yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Professor Zides, for the question. I'm just reading it again. Yeah, we did do a lot in a short time, thank you. It normally would take longer, but the need was urgent. So I think of the choices you list here, which I think are probably all the logical choices, it's funding, number one. And as I mentioned, you know, I think some of our recommendations are going to be a little bit on the expensive side. A lot of them are not, but there's no question that a lot of our recommendations, as you will see when you see the full report, come down to the need for either increased operating budget for a particular office or increased staffing, or at least finding other ways to support services which may be off campus, for instance, not necessarily staffing. All of those cost money. In today's higher ed landscape, my understanding, even just as a faculty member, is it's very expensive to run a college and to do it right. And what we found in our work is that particularly doing things in an equitable way is, it just cannot be done inexpensively, let's say. And so I think budget funding is definitely going to be our biggest challenge. And I think staffing will not be. Certainly we need to increase the diversity of our staff and our faculty. That is its own challenge, which we hope our new Chief Equity Officer will help us with. But I do want to emphasize that the staff and faculty we already have been incredibly supportive of this process. And their hearts are already in this work, and a lot of them are already doing justice and equity work. They need more help to do it. So that is not a hurdle, I don't think, other than the challenges of recruiting more diverse faculty and staff, which I'm confident that we are up to doing. Institutional inertia, of course, any institution has some of that. I was prepared for more of that than I feel like we have. This year, maybe the pandemic was a hard reset in lots of ways anyway. So many of the experts and various offices on campus we talked to, asking them questions, they were already thinking about changes they wanted to be making anyway. This isn't us trying to force anybody's hand. These are changes that were already in the works in so many people's heads and hearts. So I don't think inertia is going to be a big hurdle, or cultural norms for that matter. So yeah, thank you for interesting question.
All right, will there be an opportunity to provide feedback to the committee and the Board of Trustees before their August meeting? As Christine and Ramona have said, the report will be online, and so it'll be available. And I hadn't really thought of a quick way to do this, but I think we can just post, put a note with it, with maybe the Wofford News website. And so if you have thoughts after that, Wofford News has been taking lots of comments and thoughts along through this process. So we can just add that, and we can make sure that those comments get, your thoughts, your feedback get to the Board of Trustees. Okay. All right, Christine, well, what instances in Greek life have given cause to think all people are not accepted?
Sure, that yeah, that's a good question, because I know I sort of made a passing reference to that. That's coming from our listening session and survey data. What's happening in Greek life that people do not feel accepted? So there are two big parts of that. One is we currently do not have any MPHC organizations on campus, which are generally the Black serving fraternities and sororities, those 9 organizations. They require different structures, different certain support structures that we have not had. We are in the process of trying to charter some of those, but not having those organizations is pretty much automatically excluding a lot of our Black students from Greek life. In addition to that, we have more than just anecdotal stories from students that are current students and from alumni going back in the last 50 years across all the decades, who said they had, when it used to be the Row or now the Village, they had experienced discrimination, either turned away from parties and not allowed into a fraternity house, made fun of, harassed, that sort of thing, in ways that and that's coming mostly from our students of difference, students who are in the LGBT community, students who are Black, or students who are Muslim. We're hearing from those students that they are not feeling welcome at parties. Nobody's trying to say that all fraternities or sororities are guilty of that, but the culture is such that these students are telling us they do not feel welcome, or at least cannot count on feeling welcome. And that's something I know that some of the Greek organization leaders joined us in a listening session with JEDI. It's something some of them are very consciously working on now. And I think the committee would like to encourage them to continue to do that. That's wonderful, but there's still a lot of work to be done on that.
Okay. I've got several questions here about alumni feeling alienated by JEDI, and that they're threatening to withhold donations. Ramon and Christine and Journey, if you'd like to answer that, that's great. I will go ahead and just say from my experience, and we've been on the front lines, we've been answering a lot of questions and calls, and for every person that's upset, we have people who are not upset. And for every person who's saying they're going to withhold money, we have people who are starting funds and giving money. So, so just take that for the truth that it is. If anybody else would like to answer, that would be great.
Joe, I'll say a few things, Joanne, and I think so. First off, I think just thinking of the national context in the country. I mean, I think we're there's lots of polarization going on, right? And that impacts every place in the U.S., including Wofford. I've enjoyed the listening sessions and hearing from alumni, and hearing their stories. And I think, well, at least for me, it's been a good opportunity to listen and to learn and to try to build bridges. I also think too that sometimes, in some cases, folks haven't been, on campus in some time, right? And they're only getting bits and pieces of maybe some things that are going on, right? And what I would encourage folks is to come to Wofford, come to homecoming this fall semester, and because I think there's still a lot of what we think of Wofford as a community that's still here. But if you haven't been on campus, there it might be a little bit skewed about what you think is going on or what's happening. But again, we're these are challenging times, but I think we're building a stronger community by having these conversations and inviting people, to come back and to, and that's also, and the other thing when it comes to some of the work of Working Group 1, one thing I think, speaking everyone from that group, that, that we want to tell a full story of Wofford, right? And have all these, folks included as part of that story. So that those are just kind of some of my thoughts when it comes to that particular topic.
I'd add, these opinions are my own, but I'd add that anyone who may feel alienated by any work that strives toward diversity and inclusion and equity may want to examine how it may feel, how alienating the status quo may feel to minoritized groups or people who have not felt safe or comfortable in the status quo. If moving forward in these particular ways, and honestly, in a process this fair and this inclusive of everyone's opinions, if that is alienating, then I think that takes some personal reflection.
I just want to report that we got a comment. James Kilborn said, please understand, some of us are increasing our giving and making it clear that this additional money is designated to support diversity. Absolutely, thank you. Alumni need to be heard from in support of diversity. So that was very nice, thank you. We have one more question, and Dr. Dinkins is going to take it. Black at Wofford was created June 29th, 2020, almost a year ago. Wofford seems to be putting the responsibility on JEDI instead of proactively being a leader. What is actively being done to help BIPOC feel safe in classrooms with racist professors and classmates? It's alarming when a member of JEDI has left Wofford due to issues that haven't been openly addressed.
Yes, thank you, Joanne. I will do my best to answer that, obviously without commenting on specific issues of employment. But there are a few things I really want to highlight from Kate's question here. One, Black at Wofford, which we referenced and Kate is referencing here. If you have not yet seen it, I encourage every single person who's hearing this right now to go to read the Instagram account, Black at Wofford. It's stories from our current students, it's stories from our alumni, it's powerful stuff. It's really, really important that the experiences that are spoken about there be taken seriously. These are lived experiences of our students and alumni, and they're an incredibly important part of us understanding our institution, and they were a part of our committee's work. In terms of, and I'm quoting here, Wofford seems to be putting the responsibility on JEDI instead of proactively being a leader. Yeah, that's language I've heard from other people as well. And I really want to emphasize that seems to be a false dichotomy. JEDI is Wofford. We are a committee formed and empowered by Dr. Sam Hatt. He deliberately put students and faculty and staff and trustees on the committee. The trustees, by being on our committee, I want to make sure I emphasize, they were not putting their thumb on scales. Like they were participating as equal partners, but they also bring a certain kind of wisdom that helped us understand institutional questions, help guide our process. This process, as Journey just mentioned in her beautiful comments, this process was as inclusive as we could possibly make it. We wanted to listen to and hear from our alumni, wanted to hear from all of our current students and faculty and staff. All of that is Wofford doing that. And I think by forming this committee, giving us the opportunity to form a strategic vision and then holding a special board meeting to study the recommendations, to discuss them, to talk about how to implement them, I think that is leadership. And I think I can't really talk about it without getting kind of teary. I think those of us who did this work are incredibly proud of it. One thing we told the Board of Trustees when Ramon and I presented our report to them is on our last committee day, after, I think before we voted, I'm not sure, maybe after we voted on all of the recommendations, we went around and each committee member could just say a minute or two of how they felt about the process. Overwhelmingly, what people shared was gratitude. Gratitude at being able to participate in this process, gratitude at being given the space to do this work, and the power to make real changes for Wofford's future. We're incredibly grateful for this work. It's extremely meaningful to me that a student as what I would say, tuned in and perceptive and wise as Journey, and Dylan, who couldn't be with us, but was on our committee. Also, he can be with us today, who's our current campus union president. He's also, of course, extremely tuned in. That both of them felt good about the process and felt good about the recommendations, that this really is going to make a difference for Wofford in a positive way. I feel very good about all of that as well. And that all of that is Wofford doing that. And I don't want to ignore the other part of what you said, Kate. What is actively being done to help BIPOC feel safe in classrooms with racist professors and classmates? It's incredibly important. We have the Teach Equity Now program already going on. We have stepped up faculty and staff professional development. Dean Taifa, when she was with us, and many on the anti-racism action team, which is completely unaffiliated with JEDI, have been working to get education out there, to get resources out there. Several departments have already, on their own initiative, requested funding from the provost and gotten that funding to overhaul their advising and make sure they educate themselves on making sure they're not unintentionally being racist or biased in their advising. There's still a ton of work on that front to be done, but just what has been accomplished in terms of that in this past year, much of which has nothing to do with our committee. We can't take credit for any of that. It gives me a lot of hope, and I'm really proud of Wofford faculty and staff and students for all of that.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have this afternoon. Thanks to our panelists, the entire JEDI steering committee, and all of the people who volunteered, the student researchers and consultants for their service to the college, and for anybody who participated in this process. Your words were important and we appreciate it. Thanks also to everyone who joined us this afternoon and who has been a part of this process in any way. Well done, Terriers. Take care and have a good evening.